There are so many different blush formulas that are on the market right now, and I think it could be kind of confusing on how to apply which one. So in this video, I'm going to share the best techniques that you should be using to apply each of these blush formulas. The formulas I'm about to show you are liquids, your more traditional powder blushes, loose powder blushes, not very traditional and can definitely be a little bit tricky. One of my favorites, a duo. This has powder and cream all in one. Your classic cream blush formula. And last but not least, your stain. These you have to work very quickly with. So now let's get into how to apply all of these formulas. And just for reference, I want to talk about the foundation formula that I have on my skin right now and that I'll be reapplying as I take off each one of these blush formulas. This is a new favorite of mine. It's the KVD Serum Foundation and I'm wearing the shade Medium 048. Okay, the first one I want to demonstrate is the Westman Atelier Cream Blush in the shade Petal. This is a classic cream blush formula, and it's also, just to be fully honest, one of my favorite blushes of all time. I keep this in my makeup kit. It's one of my go-tos, especially for special occasions. It's just one of those blushes that always looks good, no matter what. It's just a beautiful formula, and I think these are actually really easy to work with. So I want to touch on how to apply the Westman Atelier cream blush, or any cream blush that is similar to this formula. It doesn't have to be this expensive. It could be drugstore, but this type of formula, this type of traditional cream, this is my best way to apply it. There's two ways. You can either take the product on the back of your hand, apply it almost as if this is like a painter's palette, right? So you're gonna apply a decent amount, however much you think you're gonna use. Take your brush. I like to apply with my N17. This is a dual fiber brush. So one side is more for powder formulas. This lighter side is more for cream formulas, which is exactly what this is. I'm gonna take that lighter fiber and I'm going to work it into the fibers of the brush. I'm gonna work that cream and kind of pre-blend it into the brush. Now this is a really foolproof way of applying this kind of formula because if you're not really that skilled with blending products onto your skin, this eliminates a lot of the risk. So by doing this pre-blend prior to it hitting your face, you're taking out all the work and the guesswork too. And that way you're left with a perfectly evenly distributed amount of product onto your brush. So that way when you go and apply it onto your cheek, it's already blended. And all you have to do is tap it in nice and gently. You don't have to spend a lot of time and energy buffing that product onto your skin because you already did all the hard work. All the hard work is done. It's already pre-blended. And now you're gonna get a nice seamless blend onto your cheek. There's gonna be no patchiness, no streakiness. It's not gonna disrupt your foundation underneath. And you're gonna be left with the most flawless and even application of blush possible. The second way you can apply this type of cream blush formula is taking the brush to the product, tapping it into that product, and then tapping it onto your skin. You're gonna get more color payoff if you use this method. So if you're going for more of a impactful blush outcome, then you could definitely try this method versus the top of the hand method because this is gonna give you more of a soft, more natural finish to your blush where you can kind of build up the intensity more slowly and more safely, whereas brush to product to face is going to be higher impact and higher color payoff, just like that. And that is my preferred way to apply a traditional cream blush like the Westman Atelier. Next up, we have liquids. These can be quite tricky. If you are not used to a more highly pigmented, concentrated liquid formula such as these are both very, very popular. One is extremely inexpensive. It's the e.l.f. Camo Liquid Blush. I love this formula. It is quite incredible and really, really impressive. And then there is the classic, very viral, very popular Rare Beauty Liquid Blush. These, I always joke around, are like the never-ending blushes. You'll never run out of this because you need such a tiny amount for a really high impact blush look. These are both almost identical formulas, so it doesn't matter which one I demonstrate. Just for the purpose of this video, and because I hear a lot of feedback about how these can be more difficult, I'm gonna be applying this one from Rare Beauty. So this is the liquid blush. Now for me personally, I have the shade Encourage. I have many others in my pro kit, but this is the one that I have for myself. And I'm gonna apply this first on the top of my hand. This is also one of my preferred ways of applying this formula because just like that cream blush that I showed you earlier, it gives you so much more control. Same brush, I do prefer to apply it with something that's a little bit more flat with that kind of fluff right here. If you go in with a brush that's too big, you're gonna end up having this product all over your face. And you wanna start actually with a smaller brush because you end up with more control. Whereas if I was to apply this kind of blush with a larger brush, there's nothing wrong with it, but I prefer this kind of brush for more powder formulas, like a powder blush formula, because if I were to use a bigger brush for this formula, it would end up, like I said, spreading to areas of my face that I don't want it to. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna pre-blend this on the top of the brush and then we're going to tap it in the very center of where we want this application to be. So we have the utmost control. It's all about control with this formula. And the one way I really don't want to see you blend on this type of blush is by going back and forth. Since this is a liquid formula, they can be more runny. And I'm actually going to apply a little bit more to my hand. If you choose to start swiping back and forth like this, you can end up with a lot of streaks. And what that's also going to do is it's going to start to break up your foundation underneath, which again, you don't want. And that's one of the biggest complaints that I hear across the board when people are asking me for advice on how to apply their Rare Beauty liquid blush that they got influenced to buy. And like, we've all been influenced to buy this formula, and it's a great formula if you use it the right way. But it can also be extremely challenging, and it could also go on really streaky, and it could just be overall really messy. So the technique that you're going to utilize, or that I want you to utilize, is very, very similar to the one that I showed you with the cream blush. And that way, like I mentioned, you're going to have the most control, and you're going to get the smoothest application, just like that. And then on this side, just so you can see the difference, I want to share with you how I wouldn't apply this blush, because this is a really common way that I see it applied online. This is how I don't want to see you apply it, because it's just going to be really hard to control and really hard to blend out. So the way I see a lot of people use this product online is by doing 3 really big dots on top of their foundation and then going to blend it out. Then I see a lot of back and forth. Blending it, and you're trying to like get it on and get it to look nice and flawless. But then what happens is the product ends up lifting up the foundation underneath. It looks patchy. It looks almost like it's muddied, and it's mixing into your foundation in a really unflattering way. And overall, the effect you get is just, it's a little messy. It's kind of all over the place. It's definitely like you don't have as much control as you did on this side, where it's got like that even blend throughout because we pre-blended it on top of our hand. It looks flawless. It looks even. There's no patchiness in the color. It's going on nice and smooth. Whereas this side, you see patchiness. It's definitely breaking up my makeup underneath. It has traveled way up towards my under eye where I don't want it to be, because now it's going to crease my under eye concealer, and you just don't want that. And I didn't have the control, right? It's not an even application. It doesn't look as flawless as it could. And then you're trying to go in and fix it and blend it out, and it just ends up getting further and further out of the areas that you want it to be. So this is the side that I don't want you to do. This is the side that I do want you to do if you want a nice even application with a more tricky liquid formula like the Rare Beauty liquid blush. So once again, this is the Rare Beauty liquid blush on both sides. This side, foolproof. Definitely a foolproof, flawless way of applying it. This side, not so much. Now with powder blushes, it doesn't matter if they're more of a luminous finish or a matte finish. You want to make sure they're going on top of a set base. So right now, I just reapplied my serum foundation from KVD on both sides, but I did not powder it. This is where it's very important to make sure you're applying your powder blushes on top of a set. It doesn't have to be super set, it doesn't have to be super matte, but doing a light veil of powder across your cheek ensures that your powder blushes are going to go on really smooth, very evenly pigmented, and you're going to be not hard pressed to blend it out and get like a nice smooth application. You're not going to be tugging and buffing and working really hard to get a nice even blend with your blush. So taking any powder, but I'm just going to show you a really lightweight powder that's really easy to work with and really easy to use. It's the Kosas Cloud Set Powder. This is really nice for dry skin. It's really nice for, all skin types. It's not going to be your oil control powder, but what it's going to do is just lightly set my cheek so my powder blush is going to go glide on super smooth without sticking to any wet patches of my cheek. And that's the most important part. So to lightly set my cheek first, I'm going to use the darker fiber side of my N17. This is for powder formulas. I'm going to dip into that Kosas powder. And the shade that I'm going to be applying is the shade Feathery. And then you're just going to sweep this, sweeping it all across my cheek and just get a nice even distribution of this powder anywhere I think I'm going to blend on my powder blush. So it's really important that you get all the areas of your cheek that you think your powder blush might hit, just in case you ensure that you have a nice smooth blend and application. So once that's on, I want to show you specifically a more difficult powder formula. And the only reason why this is more of a difficult powder formula, in my opinion, is because of the way the pans are laid out. So these are both powder blushes. One has more shimmer to it. One's just more like a straight satin finish powder blush. They're both powders, but the way these are lined up in these kind of long squares, you're not really able to get a fluffy brush like this one into these pans evenly, right? So what I suggest you do is take the brush, get a good amount, and actually this is quite a pigmented blush. What I love to do, just for like safe measure, just to make sure this goes on really nice and even and not streaky, and also just to make sure that the pigment is very evenly distributed into the brush after I hit it in the pan before it hits my face, is take the product, and I like to just tap it into the palm of my hand. This is like my foolproof way of ensuring that I have a nice even application, especially of a more vivid blush. Like this is more of a vivid shade in particular, so they can be also a little bit more intimidating and tricky to work with because they're not like a soft, natural, more forgiving shade to put on, right? So they're a little bit more pigmented and can be really intense once they first go on. We have a nice and evenly distributed on that BK Beauty brush, and now you're just gonna tap it. You're not gonna swipe and buff back and forth, right? Because that could possibly lift up that powder and the foundation underneath. You just want to be nice and gentle and just tap it in. And it's so foolproof. This method is just so foolproof. Tapping it in. And now once you get to the point where you feel like, okay, I've deposited all the product that is on the brush enough, right? Like I've deposited most of that product onto my cheek. Then you could go and start to do a swirling and swiping motion just to lightly blend out the edges of that product and get a really beautiful, almost airbrushed finish to your powder blush. And look how soft and stunning that is, right? Versus, I want to show you the difference, okay? I want to show you like what not to do with a powder blush, especially this type of formula on this side. Same brush. This side does not have any powder on it. I didn't put the Kosas powder on the side, so this is going to go on straight, pretty wet foundation. Like it's definitely tacky to the touch. It's not set, it's not matte. So this is what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to take that brush, dip into it, get a whole bunch, tap off the excess at least, and then start to swipe it on. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have to work so much harder than you would have to if you just did this technique. It's going to end up looking patchy in certain areas, even if the camera doesn't pick it up. Trust me, there's patchiness going on right here where it's clinging especially to any areas of my cheek that was still really wet from that foundation application. And that's also going to look really patchy near your eyes as well, because I do have a little bit of powder in this area and then it's wet over on this side. So then you're left with like this streak somewhere in the middle that just doesn't blend and you can't get it to lay smooth and look flawless. So this is what I don't want you to do, is buff aggressively to try to make it better and to try and make it look smooth. You're going to end up working so much harder. And again, it's just not going to look as smooth and flawless as this side. This side looks like it is just airbrushed on. It's perfectly blended. There's no patchiness. And this side, it's not horrible, but it could be so much better like this side. So that is the powder blush application shown both ways. This is definitely the do. Trust me on that. And this is definitely the don't. Okay, next up, we have probably one of the most tricky formulas in my opinion, and just from what I hear online. It's a beautiful formula if you can get it down. And I want to share my best practices on how to apply a very pigmented, loose powder blush. It's not a formula that you see that often, if at all, really. I think that Givenchy has probably one of the only, it's probably one of the only formulas out there that is a loose, very pigmented blush. And it's a beautiful blush. A lot of people I know love it. I like it, but I know how tricky it is. So let me show you the best and easiest way to apply the Givenchy Prism Libre blush. First, you're gonna open it up, of course. It has this cute little powder puff in it. I don't recommend applying this with a powder puff. It's not gonna be your best way to apply it, in my opinion. Now, I wanna suggest two different ways you can apply this, okay? One is gonna be just tapping some into the cap, just like that. But for my makeup artists out there that could be watching this video, I wanna share a really easy tip. If you're not doing this already, this is my favorite way to apply this kind of product on a client for sanitation purposes. You take an empty tissue, use this tissue as if it's the cap. You shouldn't be putting your product in the caps and then swirling your brush into it and then using that same cap from client to client. That is not the most sanitary thing you could do, obviously. It's gonna build up bacteria. Even when you're cleaning it, it doesn't matter. This is a piece of plastic or paper inside. So it's not like it's a metal dish or a metal plate where you can just like really properly sanitize it. It's gonna get a buildup of bacteria and little things in the crevice of the cap. So I don't recommend that if you're a pro makeup artist, okay? Instead, I want you to apply it into a clean tissue like that. And then you're gonna grab your brush. Okay, this is my N15. You're gonna grab your brush and you're gonna swirl it into the palm of your hand and the tissue. And you're gonna be left with something like this. But wait, just like the other powder blush, I wanna make sure that you are applying it to a really well powdered or at least a lightly powdered base. So it goes on without any kind of streaks or any kind of hiccups. You want to avoid all hiccups, especially with a very pigmented, loose powder blush. So same technique, I'm gonna take the dark fiber side of my N17, swipe into my Kosas powder, apply just a nice thin amount all over, nothing crazy. Okay, so now we have that on. We have a nice smooth base for the Givenchy to go onto our cheeks. And you're gonna start by tapping this on. And the same way, you don't wanna just go in and start to buff it aggressively. You wanna use very, very minimal back and forth movement with this kind of product, because that is going to ensure that you get a really soft and, again, very airbrush finish to your powder blush. So tapping it in is going to do all the work for you. And now let me add to this and layer to this effect, because I didn't put it that much on. And let me show you the cap method. So if you're using this blush at home and it's your personal product, go for it. Go for the cap. It's quick, it's easy. It's what I do personally. Same brush, my N15. I'm going to dip into the cap. Here's the thing. I still prefer to take that product that's on my brush, do a quick little swirly into my hand just for safe measure, and then start to tap it on. Now, one thing about this blush is it is really magical on. It really is super soft and magical on. The genius behind this blush and the genius behind this formula, it's the same formula as the viral Prism Lieb powder. Like that powder that you see me use all the time that I absolutely love and adore for under my eyes and for my T-zone and for my makeup kit. It's the same formula. So with that said, this blush in particular, this loose Givenchy blush, is going to look so smooth on your skin. And now you're gonna see me, once I got confident, right? Once I got all the products, for the most part, tapped into my cheek, that's when you can go and safely start to do some light swirls. You wouldn't want to start out with this method because, again, you're not going to get as much of an even application, but you can always end your application with this kind of swirling back and forth and light buffing strokes. And I say light because you don't want to go in and be like too aggressive and apply too much pressure. So start with the tapping motion, and then you could start to switch it up and do some light swirls just to blow out the edges of that blush, give it a really ethereal, really soft blended look. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, it really is so gorgeous. And now, of course, I have to show you the don't way. I have to show you the way that I don't want you to apply this beautiful blush from Givenchy. So the way that I don't want you to apply it, because you're gonna have a hard time, is by applying, let's just start with this amount. And let's just go for the powder puff, okay? Because it comes with the powder puff. This is what I don't want you to do because it's gonna be a lot more difficult. So taking the powder puff and then pressing it onto wet skin. Because here's the thing. It doesn't look horrible, but if you look closely, it's clinging to wet patches in my skin because I didn't set it properly. It's starting to separate under my eyes where my concealer is, and it just doesn't look as smooth and flawless and evenly distributed with the color and the color payoff as on this side. So packing it on and patting it on, although it's cute, it seems convenient because it comes with a cute little powder puff. You just kind of go powder puff into cap. It's just not going to be the best method, and it's not going to be the best outcome with this formula. So I don't want you to do that. Avoid it. Go for this method, and you're going to get a smooth, flawless, beautiful effect with a more difficult formula blush, in my opinion. That is my preferred way to apply a loose, very pigmented blush, such as the Givenchy Prism Lieb. So this is the dew side, beautiful, smooth, flawless, all the things we want with a powder blush. And this side, it's not bad. Again, it's not bad. But it's not the easiest way to apply this type of formula. Okay, next up, we have probably one of the most popular blushes on the market, or that we've seen in so many years. This blush, I don't think there's one person that doesn't know about this blush formula at this point. It is the double-sided Patrick Ta blushes. I love Patrick Ta's formulas with these blushes. They're just incredible. They really are such an amazing blush formula. And the fact that you get a powder formula on the bottom, and then under this little flap is the very well protected cream formula. Now, the tricky thing about this blush, or not tricky, but the, I guess, unexpected thing about this blush formula is, you know, as a makeup artist and just with makeup in general, the rule of thumb is to apply a cream first, and then for longevity, for more color payoff, you'd want to layer a powder in a like-minded shade on top of it. That's just how makeup works, right? You put liquids down, you set them with powders. It's that exact idea. However, Patrick Ta changed the game and told us, no, you should be using my formula, powder first, and then putting the cream on top. So let me show you both ways you can use this beautiful blush formula. There's no wrong way to do it, honestly. And if you do it the right way, it's gonna look so perfect and so flawless. So let me show you the Patrick Ta method first, and then we'll switch to the more traditional method, and I'll show you that you can use it the other way, the opposite way as well with this other shade. So this is the shade Not Too Much, and this is the shade Just Enough. Let's apply Just Enough first. And I'm going to take a clean N15 brush, dip into the powder side, but I'm sorry, before we do that, don't forget, lightly set your cheeks because you're going powder first. Okay, cheeks are lightly set. I'm gonna tap off the excess just for safe measure. and I'm going to tap on the powder blush first. And same technique you're going to see throughout this entire video. I always start with a tapping motion. This is the most foolproof way to apply pretty much majority of these formulas that I'm showing you in this video. This is going to be your best friend method. It really is for a smooth, flawless, more pro-like finish to your blush. You want to start by tapping it on, get it nice and evenly distributed onto your cheek, just like that, and avoiding any streakiness and any muddiness with your product. So powder is on, and then keeping it true to the Patrick Ta method, Patrick always takes a damp beauty sponge, then dips into the cream formula. Now what you can do is kind of like tap it and bounce it on top of that cream. You don't need to be too aggressive. You don't need to swipe it back and forth because you're gonna end up picking up too much of the product. Instead, you wanna do light taps, just like you would with your brush, right? Lightly tap it, evenly distribute it onto the sponge. It's hard to tell because it's like almost the identical pink as the sponge that I chose. And then you're gonna just tap it on top and just bounce that cream on top of the powder. And the reason behind this is it just brings that skin-like quality back to your powder blush formula. So, you know, when you think about like if you have a whole face of matte products on, it could be a little lifeless, it could look a little dull, it could look very like makeup-y and not really skin-like. By applying the cream on top of the powder, you just bring back this beautiful, healthy, you know, vibrancy to your cheek. You bring back that skin-like quality and that skin-like glow. So it's a really beautiful, really flattering way of wearing this duo. It could be a little tricky, it could be hard to get used to, but try it out and use those two methods and you'll get a really beautiful, flawless, Patrick Ta approved finish to your blush. So now I'll be applying the shade not too much on this side, and you'll notice I did not powder my foundation with the Kosas powder. We're gonna leave it dewy, we're gonna leave it just as is. It's totally fine because we're gonna go in first with this gorgeous cream side of the blush. Now I'm grabbing my last clean N17 until I have to clean the rest of these brushes, and I'm gonna use the lighter fiber side first because I'm gonna dip into the cream. I'm gonna get a decent amount on my brush, and then just again, for safe measure, I'm gonna pre-blend it on the top of my hand so it's nice and evenly distributed, and I'm gonna start in a tapping motion, not swiping, not buffing. Again, your makeup is not set underneath, it's going on top of more of a wet base, so you wanna be careful. You wanna make sure you're not gonna rip up that product underneath, and you wanna make sure it's not gonna look muddy and start to mix into that wet product, because both these products are wet. So you have to be careful when you're applying it and not apply too much pressure, because if you apply too much pressure, the wet on top of wet, they're gonna mix together and it's not gonna be the effect that you want. So just starting with that light tapping motion, I'm dipping into a little bit more. This color is a lot more natural than this last one, so it's a little bit more forgiving and you can start to build it up too. So tapping and tapping. And then what I like to do first, okay, before I dip into the powder side to layer that on top, for safe measure, I'm going to use that darker fiber side of my N17 brush. I'm gonna grab my Kosas powder, okay? This is what I always do just to ensure that I don't have any streaky line between my cream blush and my under eye concealer and also my foundation. You wanna make sure this is like nice and set and seamless before you go in with your powder blush to set this and lock it in so it just looks nice and flawless and there's no room for error. So taking the Kosas powder or any powder you want, you could also use a powder puff for this method as well. I'm just gonna use the darker fiber side of my brush, swirl into the cloud set powder, and we're gonna tap along the edge of where that cream blush stops. This is what you wanna do. This is the game-changing method to ensure that layering these two products together goes on smooth and seamless, and there's no patchiness. Okay, so once that's on, you don't need to worry about setting this with powder, because if anything, that's gonna diminish the color payoff. You just wanna make sure that this line right here on the top of your cheekbone is nice and set and matte. Now, same brush. It doesn't matter if it has a little bit of the Kosas powder on it. It's totally fine. It's a very sheer powder, so it's not gonna affect the color too much of the blush formula. So taking the same brush, I'm gonna dip into the powder side now. This is such a great color. I love both these colors so much. Tap off the excess. Always just a good idea just to make sure you don't apply too much product at once. And then you're gonna layer by tapping it on with light pressure. No buffing, no swiping, no aggressive blending back and forth. Just trust me, don't do that. Just tap it on top. You can see it's already much more pigmented. The color payoff and the intensity is way more impactful. And because you layered that powder on top of the cream, you're gonna have such great longevity with your blush. So for anyone out there who's always been like, or reached out to me, I get a lot of questions online. asking, you know, how can I keep my blush on longer? How come it fades so quickly throughout the day? Blush is just one of those things that tends to fade very quickly on all of us. It's like a universal thing. So if you can layer your blushes and your blush formulas, that is going to be your best bet to keeping your blush on all day long. Two different methods. There's no right or wrong way. There's just different techniques to make sure they both go on super smooth and super flawless. So once again, this is just enough and not too much. Both are so stunning. Both different applications. Both give a beautiful glow. This side is going to be a lot more glowy because we finished with that cream product. This side's going to be a little bit more satin and a little bit more soft focus because we finished with the powder. Now, last but not least, I'm going to share with you the best method to apply these jelly tints, specifically any kind of stain. These are a stain blush. They are quite pigmented. They dry incredibly quick. You have to act very fast with these. They are not for the faint of heart. Let me show you my best practices and methods on how to apply these. But first, we are switching up the formula of our base product. Now, you really wouldn't want to apply a product like this, a stain like this, on top of a full coverage, more satin to semi-matte or even matte finish foundation, because the combination is just not going to work that well together. The reason for that being is because if you apply something like this, even if it's on top of a foundation that's not fully set, like the serum foundation from KVD, it still has more of a satin to matte finish. And what that's gonna do is dry this down almost immediately. So you're not able to go and blend this product out like you would if you were to apply it on more of a dewy, luminous finished product. I've had really incredible results layering this jelly tint on top of the Fenty Beauty Eavesdrop Skin Tint. This is a tint. That's in the name, right? So it's gonna be more glowy, more juicy, a little bit more luminous. But what that's really gonna do is offer you more playtime to blend out this product so it looks nice and smooth and not streaky. So let me apply this from Fenty Beauty. It's in the shade 8. I'm gonna apply this all over on both sides. And of course, the biggest takeaway for this product and this application is you just wanna make sure that you're not applying these jelly tints or any kind of cheek stain on top of a matte finish or a set base, because you're not gonna be able to blend it out. It's gonna dry instantly. You're gonna have a big streak, like almost as if you grabbed a highlighter and just went like this to your cheek, and it's not gonna be your best method. It's not gonna work well. So I'm gonna apply this Fenty Eavesdrop tint stick on both sides with my N17 brush. So as you can see, this has a beautiful luminous glow to it on my cheek. So my cheek is gonna be just nice and glowy and more of a hydrated base to blend that tint on. So now that's evenly on both sides. Here is what I recommend. I actually don't like the method of taking the brush, applying it brush on top of product, then to skin. I actually don't think that's the best method for this product. And I also don't like the fact that this product is it stains really quick, and it will also really stain and get into the fibers of your brushes. So I don't like that method. I don't prefer it personally, and I don't think it's necessary. I think you actually get great results if you just swipe on very wet skin like I have right now. You can do a couple different layers, and then you want to immediately go in, but you want to focus your blend first on the edges, because the edges are what matter the most. It's not so much the center on the apples, it's really getting in there quickly and blending out the edges of this product so it looks nice and seamless and you're not left with any streaks. So just like that. So working quickly. You don't want to give it any time to dry down because it's going to dry down very, very fast. And then what you could do right after, just to build up the intensity, is you can start to layer it. But again, you want to start by blending in circles and blending out the edges right away. This is going to be your number one priority. And you can see I'm just doing a fast tapping motion. Even with a product like this, you don't want to go in and start to buff. You just don't, because it's going to create that muddied effect and it's going to look patchy, it's going to look streaky, and you don't want that. Keep the tapping motion throughout all the formulas. It's going to be your best friend tapping on your products. And look how pretty that is. I'm going to apply a little bit more down here because I want a little more color payoff. And then tap, tap, tap. And the beauty of these is once they dry down, they're golden. I mean, they are very long lasting, or at least they have been for me. And the bases that I put them on top of, they give you a beautiful, really fresh, like flushed appearance to your skin. They just look really healthy, really gorgeous on. I also absolutely love taking a little bit of that product and swiping it across my nose. I think the effect that this gives on the nose is just so beautiful and so youthful and just really fresh. And now, same thing, let's finish up since this is our last formula. We're gonna swipe on and repeat on this side. Tapping in right away, focusing on the edges, that's the most important part. And it doesn't matter if the center of it dries down as you're tapping in the edges, because the edges are the most important part to be blended. period. If you have to prioritize, make sure you prioritize those edges. And you will notice too, I am applying more pressure with this blend because you just have to. This formula is a lot less forgiving. It dries really quick. So you want to put a little more pressure, put a little more oomph behind your tapping. It's not going to be a light tap like the rest of the products were that I showed you. This is going to be more of like there's some impact. There's a little more strength behind this tapping. So one more layer of this beautiful jelly tint. And I really hope this is especially helpful because I've had a lot of questions online recently on how to apply this now very viral jelly tint from Milk. Now, because I want to throw in a bonus tip, because I think there's a lot of value with this bonus tip. The bonus tip is, let's say you swiped on too much of your blush, too much of your jelly tint, or any of your tint, and you let it dry down. I'm gonna let this dry down for a couple seconds, and I wanna show you how to fix a dried down, unblended tint on your skin, okay? You don't have to start over, you don't have to wash your face. I promise you, I got you. There's a really easy way to fix this up. All right, the best method to fix this up is just taking more of your foundation, okay? And you're gonna specifically hit the edges. The top edge where it's really obvious that it was not blended, that it just dried as a streak. And then go back to that same brush. This is the same brush we used earlier. And then you wanna just redistribute and work a light layer of your foundation on top, and then start to just layer it lightly on top of that tint. And this is gonna be your best bet to fix an unblended tint on your cheek. Grabbing a little more just for right here, and that's it. We're fixed, we're done. These are some of my best tips on how to apply some of these really popular, very viral blushes. I really hope this helps to clear up any questions or confusion about how to apply these products and these different formulas, because there's so many on the market these days. Leave me a comment if you have any other questions on how to apply these products. If you like how-to videos like this, I have so many more. You can check them out right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.